Hey everybody, we're going to be talking about biodiversity and biodiversity loss today and its impact on humans, including the spread of novel diseases that tend to, these are, people seem to think of diseases and viruses as just this, it's just this natural, it's just a part of Mother Nature, and you just gotta let this natural process just work its way through your lungs and your neurologic system, and it's not the case. There are a number of evolutionary mismatches, the world that we were built for, the world that our immune system was built for, the world that our mating patterns, all different things. The way that we advertise ourselves, status seeking, cooperation, aggression, all of those things were shaped in a very different environment than we're currently in, and those have huge impacts. So I'm really happy that my guest Deb Miller today is on, because I just keep on hearing this from people, both sides of the fence. I don't know why there's only two sides, but I guess that's what we're doing for now. And both sides seem to be, I've heard a lot of people just say, well, it just happens sometimes, this is just what happens. It's just a natural, perfectly natural pathogen, nothing to worry about. And these are conversations we're going to have to deal with. This is what people want to say with climate change and write it off as a natural process. And there are, even if that were the case, whatever the word natural means, even if that were the case, it has dramatic consequences on our lives and our future and life as we know it. So if you also want to hear more about some of my takes on COVID, I did a solo episode recently where I kind of talk about the kind of things that I have to think about when trying to plan out a tour, when thinking about possibly doing shows, distance shows, outdoor shows, those sorts of things, commenting on the state of current comedy during COVID. And so if you want to go back and listen to that, touch on a couple of those ideas on this episode as well. So sorry if it's a little redundant and don't want to hit you over the head with COVID stuff. Haven't done much in the last 2 months, and I don't know exactly the right balance. I kind of wanted to put some stuff out before Thanksgiving, and the timing of getting the right guests, and there's a lot of people the people that you want to talk to most about this are the most preoccupied trying to save the world at the moment. And so I also don't want to bother them too much. I don't want to hound people, and I don't want to alienate people by talking about it too much, even people that are already taking COVID seriously. I don't want to hit them over the head and make them stress out more than is necessary. And so I don't know what the exact right balance is, but this holiday season is going to be really problematic, and I just sincerely hope that I think that most people listening to this show probably know better than to just write things off and live their lives as if there isn't a virus that you can get and give to a bunch of other people. And you might think it's like the death rate's low or something like that, but if I framed it like, hey, I gave 50 people COVID and only one of them died, so I'm only responsible for one person dying, so I don't see what the fuss is. Why are people getting so worked up about this thing? I don't want to hear about the long-term impacts that the other 49, some percentage of them are are facing, and who knows, time will tell the real damage that's been done. I got to get out there, got to go to bars, gatherings and stuff. I hope that people watching this show aren't doing that. I don't want to make you feel bad for it either, but I'm just happy that we're able to approach this from as many angles as possible. So biodiversity doesn't matter. Even if you think COVID is not a big deal or whatever else, I think that you'll hopefully agree by the end of this episode that if you didn't already think this and listen to a science podcast, that the loss of biodiversity is a real issue, but there's some new things that I certainly had never thought about before, and I hope you do as well. Hope you did have a nice holiday season. One thing I'd highly recommend, I have a habit from being alone on the road all of the time by myself, which I'm a bit of a loner, and I kind of like that, but I also keep in touch with a lot of people, and I spend more time, even before COVID, I spend lots of time catching up with old high school friends and old comedian friends I hadn't talked to in a while. I'll reach out and have a long conversation, and keeping in touch with people that I enjoy having philosophical conversations with. And I think in a day of texting and email and stuff, some of that is lost. And if you're feeling a need for social connection, we all kind of mocked all of the Zoom meetups and everything early on, and I'm sure I told some jokes about it as well, and I've just come to realize it's been one of the things that has just really helped me in all of this, not feel as disconnected. So I recommend one good thing for mental health is reaching out to people, and a lot of people are in the same boat, and they'd probably appreciate it, and are just reluctant to reach out because no one calls anybody anymore. So take that for what it's worth, but it's something that a lot of people don't think to do. So pick up the phone, call a few people, and I wish you all the best out there. This is a challenging situation, even when it doesn't feel challenging, and we forget how challenging it is sometimes, and then we slip up. So take care of yourselves. Thanks so much for watching. You guys are awesome.
Are we?
Yes.
Where are we?
Here.
Why are we here? Not entirely clear. We are misfits thrust into existence by random chance, with no hints at all as to how we're supposed to make sense of it all. It's immensely bizarre. Here we are.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Here We Are podcast. I am comedian and science enthusiast Shane Mauss. Joining me today, did I just say my last name wrong? I think I might have. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Here We Are podcast. I'm comedian and science communicator Shane Mauss. Joining me today is Deb Miller, who was recommended by, through COVID, some of the listeners' favorite guests that we've had on twice now, Nina Pfefferman. Such an impressive scientist and communicator, and I reached out to her for some suggestions, and I have Deb Miller joining me today, who I'm so thrilled to talk to. Deb, can you tell me and listeners a bit about what you do?
Sure. Well, I am actually, I'm a professor at the University of Tennessee. I am a veterinary pathologist and also a wildlife biologist. So I have combined both of those things. Those are my passions. And as part of that, I am the current interim director for the One Health Initiative at the University of Tennessee.
What is the One Health Initiative?
The One Health Initiative is, so first of all, One Health, it's an approach, right? It's how we look at and tackle issues pertaining to any health issue. And it's bringing together people from multiple disciplines, because you need to have experts that can represent every single aspect of a health issue. It might be the veterinary aspect, so the animal health. It might be plant health. It might be human health. It might be environmental health. And those are kind of the four things that we always think about with health in general. And we bring together experts, including people who are experts in communication, in economics, in engineering, architecture, all of those, to try to solve problems. Well, first of all, we try to prevent them. We don't like to have pandemics. But then when we do, to solve them and then to be able to move forward with a plan. It's a coordinated effort. So our One Health initiative at the University of Tennessee is just that. It is a way to bring together all of the experts that we have at UT, people that can work as teams, and they're going to be doing what they're already doing. So researching what they're already researching, providing education in whatever they're already providing education, but working together with other folks so that they can then we can partner outside of the university and look at any of these issues. For example, loss of biodiversity. People don't always think about that as being a part of health, but it is. If we lose biodiversity, it's telling you there's something wrong in that environment. Yeah. And when you know that, then you need to identify what it is, and why it's happening, so that you can try to correct it.
Yeah, such a huge for all of the media attention that climate change and just global warming generally gets, which is great and not enough. I wish there was more of it, but you definitely don't hear the word biodiversity as much in the news. And obviously these things are, especially climate change, has a huge impact on this, and there's a million other human factors and other factors that go into it, but it's seemingly so underrepresented. And I think it's one of the things that there's maybe less people have less kind of political predispositions and judgments already formed in terms of threats to biodiversity. I think your average person in any it's hunting season in Wisconsin right now, and there's all sorts of people out there that might think global warming is either not a thing or not much of a threat, or maybe not human impact, or what it might have political opinions about it or disagree with the science of it, that I'm sure are care deeply about wildlife and having healthy woods and forests and being able to hunt healthy populations of deer and everything else.
Exactly. And that's what One Health is about, realizing that everything is interconnected. The health of any creature is impacted by the health of all the other creatures. So we're all, we have one Earth, right? And we're all living on it together. So, it makes sense that everything is interconnected.
And so you look into some of how wildlife deals with pathogens as well. And so like say you have like a bat or an ant or some other kind of social organism, and there's some new infection. Do they all kind of discuss where they fall politically and then take their precautions accordingly, or how do ants go about avoiding diseases or limiting spread?
That's awesome. So one thing that I always tell people, nobody other than humans understands borders, right? They
Yeah.
don't have borders. Wildlife don't have borders. Pathogens don't have borders. And we transport everything around the world now. We've watched that with COVID. We've been able to, I mean, I think this may be the first time this has happened where we've been able to watch a pathogen move across the entire globe. And that's amazing.
Yeah.
But we watched it probably because it was impacting humans pretty severely. But this is happening with other things as well.
Yeah.
So, for example, I mean, you brought up bats. We have white nose syndrome, which is a fungus. We also have a fungus that occurs in snakes and is devastating to them. We have a fungus that occurs in amphibians and it's devastating to them. And in all of those cases, they started out in one part of the globe and now we're seeing them in other parts of the globe.
Yeah.
Not spreading as quickly maybe as COVID did, but spreading quickly. And we scientists are really working to try to limit the spread, try to stop it, and then try to study it to see what it's doing to various species.
Yeah, I've had since COVID, I had a bat researcher that had actually been on my show Stand Up Science last year, and I thought of her talking about the white nose. What is it, a fungus or something? Yeah,
Yep.
And I had her on talking about how they think it's some caver that came from Europe, maybe had some on his boot or something like that, and then it comes in and it's this. It kind of a lot of times with these things, a lot of these viruses evolve in some kind of native environment where there's this like red queen or balance of push and pull kind of thing happening where the virus takes off a little bit and the native organisms will adapt a little bit and some will die off and there's this kind of arms race. But then when you take that out and put it in this completely new environment, that now this virus that's kind of built up and learned all these tricks now has these tricks that some new bat in New Hampshire or whatever never saw coming.
Exactly. It's all about checks and balances. And if you think about it, a pathogen and viruses can be very smart.
Yeah.
But any type of pathogen, it's like anything else. They want to survive, right?
Yeah.
And you don't want to kill off all of your hosts because if you do that, then you're probably not going to survive. So you want that. You want to be able to live with your host. So you do have that. So some of them will die off, but they will evolve. The host will evolve to, I think that I'm going to survive this by in this way. So genetically they evolve. And then the pathogen is like, I can overcome that a little bit. And so it's that give and take, but they're surviving together. And then you take whatever, you might take the host and move it someplace else, or the pathogen and move it someplace else. And it's going to be the same thing, where all of a sudden, it's like if you travel to another country and you've never been there, and you adapt to whatever pathogens you come in contact with. I remember when we went and lived in Spain for a short period of time on sabbatical. And when I got there, I contracted probably just a cold like anybody else would get. But that cold virus they had there was, oh my gosh, it was horrible for me. Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing. You could take the host and move it, and whatever their natural pathogens are that are in that area are going to be new.
Yeah, you go on a cruise, which some people
Yeah.
are still trying to do for some
Yes.
reason, and you get off, and they might warn you to be wary of the drinking water in
Yes.
this foreign environment or something. Well, at this point, if you're going on a COVID crew, they're probably like, "Have at it! You clearly aren't terribly concerned about much of anything." I keep on. That's been one of the things of kind of knowing the. I think there's this perception from movies where, like, well, a virus could happen and, like, people get it and fall over or turn into zombies or whatever, and it's this extreme, and neglect kind of the understanding of the mechanisms of, like you said, a virus needing a host to at least survive long enough to pass it on to some other host. And so whenever people are just like, oh, it's not that big, or death rates, this and that, I'm always kind of like, well, how deadly would you prefer it to be? Like, how deadly do you want it to be? And then, and you might get your wish too. And so I think there is kind of a misunderstanding of that going on a little bit too, where people are like, well, no one's a zombie, so I think we'll be okay. But these are in hopefully using this experience as something that maybe moves the needle a little bit in terms of people's just general kind of science literacy and just basic kind of fundamental immunology knowledge, so that we kind of know when the next, we've had SARS and various, AIDS and various virus within my lifetime that have popped up, and some have been contained and some haven't, and hopefully as we're learning more skills about this, that's one of the things that that we can convey to people, that
Yes.
it's not necessarily just all death rate stuff.
Right.
There's so many other factors going on. So anyway,
Right.
that's my little diatribe. So what kind of, back to the question of different species, what kind of, so if you are in some native environment and there's a virus that you're evolving alongside with, what kind of adaptations do social animals have to picking up on that there's that another individual is showing signs of sickness, and what kind of disease avoidance actions or behaviors do they take?
Yeah. Well, so they will, for in a wild animal, for example, if they sense that there's something wrong with one individual, they're probably going to avoid that individual as much as possible. And that's kind of been something that we've known, not just for disease, but if they know that an animal's not going to be able to keep up with the herd, they sense that when there's something wrong with it, and it might not look like it's the friendly, kind thing to do from the human standpoint, but from the animal standpoint, it's a survival mechanism. So there will be some of that, but I think more than anything, it's us recognizing that there is something increasing in a population and identifying when this is happening and identifying what is happening and then intervening as much as we can.
So is part of, say if you take a zebra or something, and so obviously humans, for all of our incredible language and tool using abilities and all this. We're so very smart and everything else. We still have obviously a very difficult time wrapping our heads around this kind of abstract idea of germ theory that's relatively new in our history. And so evolution kind of builds some had built some heuristics that aren't necessarily a perfect bullseye in figuring out exactly what's wrong in a situation, and so something that might be an injury that isn't contagious might there might be some kind of better safe than sorry kind of psychological adaptions to things, right? Like if something has a broken leg or something like that, it would potentially a zebra be like, yeah, that thing might be sick, whatever it is, there's something wrong with it, let's not think about it too much, let's just get away.
Right, because it's going to start acting differently,
Mm-hmm.
and animals cue in on that. If anything's acting different in any way, they're gonna be very wary and suspect that something's not right. And a lot of times it might not just be acting. There'll be smells. An animal might all of a sudden their smell is going to change, and there's all these different cues that the other animals will pick up on that something's wrong.
Mm. So are there any useful tools that we've learned from looking at other species that we can like take some of their tricks? I just had someone on recently talking about how that was a cardiologist, and then was brought into a zoo to look at some hearts of gorillas and then a few other things, and then started learning all of these things from veterinarians that regular physicians were completely unaware of, that were really useful in terms of, say, examining breast cancer, or there's a list a mile long.
Mm-hmm. So as far as what we learned from animal populations and how they respond to infections or pathogens that come in, I guess there's some things that we can learn from them. I think more though than learning from them how to respond to others within
right.
cohort that become infected. So maybe the social distancing does come from animals,
right.
But I think more than that, it's understanding that it takes more than just that species to battle it. Mm-hmm. So in the One Health view, we look at it as, maybe you could think of it as being the different disciplines, so the different experts that you need to bring them in to study what's going on and to come up with ways to correct it. So I think that, again, I've heard stories about after a typhoon, for example, there's been some natural disaster. People are without shelter, and they are getting ill because the water is no longer safe. So everything's been destroyed. Their water, their sanitation, their garbage, everything has been just thrown into turmoil. Mm. And what has been the approach, maybe in some cases, has been to go in and give antibiotics just to treat them as they're getting sick, and not realizing, so they're bringing in the health professionals, but they're not realizing that what they really need are the engineers and the architects, because if they get the system back working and the water healthy, the food healthy, if they get the people shelter, proper shelter that can be safe and clean, the problem of getting infections will go away. So that's a good example of how we would need to take this One Health approach. So in the animal world, in their social setting, they might end up having to help those that are sick if they can, but more often than not is going to be, hey, you're the one who's going to get picked off by the predator coming in, and that's going to protect the rest of us so the healthier ones can move on. But that's different than looking at, okay, so you have this situation, you have this pathogen, and it is a new pathogen and it's spreading. How do we tackle that? So that's what, that's it, if you can think about it as two separate things.
Right. So I love how much we're trying to be more and more interdisciplinary as time goes on. One of the this is kind of my, if I have a strong suit, it's that I'm definitely not an A student, but I'm a C student in tons and tons and tons of different fields. I talk with lots of different people and lots of different disciplines all the time, and I'm like okay in all of them, but you start kind of building this like web of causation and stuff over time that it is easier for the human mind to try to simplify things and be like, this is just an issue of masks, or it's a all or nothing kind of thing with the lockdown. We either care about COVID or we care about the economy. Those are two different things that don't relate to one another in any way. And so pick one. And it's just, I mean, even a simple example is I tell people who ask me when I'm going to be touring again all of the time. I tell people, look, assuming that I didn't care about COVID, which I do, I wouldn't want, I just have no interest in encouraging people to come in, gather indoors. I know from my experience of like being out and about and having to walk backwards as people are coming to talk toward me and them not getting the cue as I'm walking backwards faster. Like I don't trust people's ability to adapt to this, and I would feel awful if people were like, well, Shane has a science podcast and he did a live show, so he must be taking proper precautions, and so it must be okay for us to all gather in a room together while we have the highest numbers ever. But say that wasn't the case and I didn't care or whatever, and I thought this was just a cold or something like that, I still need to consider public perception in how to, I'm also a show producer, so I need to get butts into seats. And it's something that I'll have to figure out once there is a vaccine and everyone's taken it and the threat's been mitigated. There still needs to be, consumer confidence is now so intertwined with COVID numbers. And a lot of people, even if I told them, hey, this is perfectly safe and we've done everything and we've taken your temperature, which is borderline worthless, but it makes you feel good. And there's still going to be people that are like, I don't know if it's worth risking my life to go to a comedy show because of some comedian's take on what's safe and what's not. So to me, the only way forward from an economic small business guy, which I am, is to get numbers down low enough to get treatments good enough so that truly people don't, to have enough information so that there aren't as many unknowns about reinfection and long-term consequences. And there's all of those questions need to be answered in the minds of potential customers before they'll come and patronize my business. And so it's simply not this economic versus virus argument.
No, you're exactly right. It's not. And in the meantime, while you're waiting on the treatment, and gathering of all the data, it's important to become creative, just like you have done.
Yeah.
It's better if you can still make money doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely trying to make the most of all of my time, and for me, it's been a nice. I've been on the road for 14 years, so it's probably it was probably good for me to step back from things for a minute and re-examine things. That's another thing that I feel like people are kind of missing out on, a lot of opportunity to possibly rethink things and make improvements to their businesses and personal life and physical health and everything else. And a lot of people are just kind of caught up in whether we believe this is a thing or a real threat or not.
Yes, exactly.
So in terms of, you had mentioned some evolutionary mismatches.
Yes.
Earlier with now all of a sudden we can have this pathogen that can make its way. A virus is able to hop on an airplane and have a first-class flight to some other country, and this is something that never happened before. What about the idea? Because here's another thing that I've been thinking a lot about, and I want you to correct me if I'm off in this. We live in more compact and larger societies than ever, and I mean, wasn't the origin of some of the modern diseases connected to modern agriculture in the first place? So this is something that in our 250,000 year history we maybe wouldn't have been putting livestock in close quarters, and then and perhaps creating a petri dish for more viruses and bacteria, and then eating that and putting ourselves in a similar petri dish. Any thoughts about that?
Yes, exactly. And what's really important to think about is it even goes further back than that, probably, or even more basic than that. It's just that we have taken away, we started out with nice forested land that was continuously forested, or this continuous prairie land. And through time, people have clear cut, have taken away that habitat, put up their own homes. So we're encroaching upon upon wildlife, upon the environment. And then not only we're not just like chiseling it away a little bit at a time, we're actually often chiseling away and then, let's go over here and start this. And so all of a sudden we only have these little fragments of habitat left. And in doing that, we have changed how the amount of land that there is for wildlife. So sometimes we're forcing them into little areas, and then if they wander out, like deer, a good example, they wander out and they get amongst humans, deer, coyotes, raccoons. We like seeing them until they start causing problems, but they're there because they kind of have no place else to go. And so they're trying to adapt. And in doing that, we often allow, let me back up. The other thing that we're doing is we put a lot of stuff in the environment that we might intentionally do to try to control plants that we don't want growing, or insects or whatever, or we want to increase growth of things that we really need for food, or we're growing only one thing in an area. So we do all of this. So we're adding what we call, let's just say, contaminants. Okay, we have things that contaminants that are from whatever we're trying to produce industry-wise, or our vehicles, that, anything that makes our life simpler. There's usually something bad that is also happening. And I like to add to that something that's kind of new on the scene, that people haven't really thought a whole lot about, but things that we're trying to do now to make ourselves healthier, and we think it's good, like putting sunscreen on, putting insecticide on, because we don't want Zika virus, we don't want West Nile, we don't want all those things. And we think of them as good, and they are, but then we're realizing that, hey, here are these animals swimming around in the ocean, and we're finding these chemicals in them. I don't think they're putting sunscreen on or insecticide.
I
And
had
that's
never
crazy,
thought
right?
of that.
Yeah, and actually, Hawaii is probably the first state to start to ban certain sunscreens because it's damaging marine life. Coral is one of them. So, all of these things that we don't even realize might be causing problems until we realize they are. And then when we realize that, we need to do something.
Oh man, Deb, I love finding out a new horrifyingly depressing problem. Every time, I swear I get like one an episode, and I just get so excited about it. And I half kid, but this is just part of to me, I think that we can reframe some of this modern problem solving as part of this like mindfulness stuff that everyone's talking about these days, and is all the rage. Because you say something like that to me and it blows my mind. Like, oh my gosh, I've never thought about that before. Now every single time I put insecticide or see someone else putting sunscreen on or whatever, that thought is going to enter my mind. And if we can get those thoughts entering enough people's minds, perhaps like what Australia is doing, there might, a lot of times, some of these things, there are, if not easy, there are solutions if only people become aware of them. If only they become, you just, the likelihood of a sunscreen debate taking place in Congress isn't that high until it's permeated the kind of zeitgeist of our culture enough that enough people are talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. And understanding it and realizing, okay, so you don't need to just stop putting on sunscreen, but maybe your choice is choices that we make. We all make a million choices a day, and we just need to think more about the choices that we make. So, use a sunscreen that, at least at this point in time, we think is much safer. I don't like wearing long sleeves when it's really hot out, but that is also another option, wearing hats and things like that. So there are just other options. And again, it boils down to choices. Humans want things to be easier for many reasons, not just because they're easier. I mean, sometimes as you age, you need things to be easier sometimes, right? But also because we often equate that with being more efficient. And we're all trying to multitask and to do so many things that we need that. But we have to think about the choices that we're making when we're doing that, so that we're not making things more difficult in the long run for us, and
Yeah.
making things less healthy. And whether it's health, mental health, physical health, whatever, we need to think about that.
Yeah. I think that a lot of times the, say, like global warming debate is framed as like, well, there's one side that does not believe in global warming and another side that does, but often it's the case that most people believe in global warming, and then a smaller percentage of people believe that there's human impact in it, and then a smaller still, it's not necessarily the idea of global warming or the facts of the matter that people have a problem with. It is the costs and inconvenience in making the adjustments that and the trade-offs there seem to be more of the debate and pushback against. But if there was say everyone in the world right now just happened to be listening to this, heard this new sunscreen fact, geez, I didn't know that my sunscreen could be hurting ocean life, and then everyone knows about this issue. It gets a little buzz on the news for a little while, and then what do you know? Some manufacturer figures it out, and now you go to the store and there's a little label on something that says, wildlife safe sunscreen or something. I believe that if enough people were aware, a decent number of people would choose the harm-free, the sunscreen that's safe for fish or whatever.
Yeah, I believe so too, because I think, people don't want to intentionally harm our environment because we're living in it, right?
Right.
And, and so I think if they're offered good choices, they will want to take the good choice. So at least that's what I believe.
What do you?
Those are really important points, I think, that we need to consider.
And what are some of your thoughts on the kind of push and pull of how much of this is the responsibility of this is individual responsibility and certainly often it's barely speculation at this point that Western culture is a bit more individualistic than some others, but the conversation between, do we take a policy driven approach? Do we say, hey, this is individuals using too much sunscreen, or do we say, hey, sunscreen makers, we're going to put these restrictions on what you're able to put in sunscreen? That's a huge conversation these days of what is too much government overreach, or what's just going to end up wasting tax money on bureaucracy, or these regulations are an infringement on our most prized individuals, which is that corporations are people, and we must care for their individual rights. Do you have? I maybe just showed my cards a little bit there on what my stance are. But do you have any take on kind of that debate? And I imagine there's a lot of different, probably approaching from as many different angles as we can.
Yeah, well, and that's basically what I was going to say. I mean, I don't think that I would love it if it would be that we could say that, oh, we're just going to give these choices and that's going to be it, and everybody's going to do what they need to do. But that's not really the way life works. And so, unfortunately, to really make a difference in a timely manner, we often need policy to help with that. The challenge can be coming up with the right policy, because sometimes we make policy and it doesn't always serve its purpose or really tackle the issue, or it comes along with these other things with it. I think that it needs to be a combination of things, but you still need to work hard at it. You can't just jump into it too fast. You have to think it through.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like there are instances in which the kind of individual responsibility thing is a kind of corporate cop out, where this happened with seatbelts, and it's saying like, well, this driver's screwing up, and not the way that our car is constructed or whatever, and or that we don't offer a seatbelt option, or I think the idea of carbon footprint was popularized by British Petroleum, and there's been several instances like that. But and then at the same time, you might have someone that's a little more of my leaning, which is I'm pretty pro regulation in these regards and regulating the regulators, but I also can't be like, well, I'm going to drink as many plastic bottles of water as I want because look at that smokestack over there. That's what the real issue is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess, and that's a good point. Like with the carbon footprint, I worry that people think, oh, I can do anything I want, and then I'll just throw some money over here and that makes up for it. It's like, well, no, because once that resource is gone or destroyed or damaged, it's kind of a done deal. And so can we minimize that somehow, instead of saying, oh, I can go ahead and do that because I'm doing this over here.
Yeah.
You don't erase it by some good deed.
Right.
You don't erase a bad deed by some good deed. So I don't know.
I have no idea if we're now getting like way outside of your wheelhouse with this next question. So you can have a whack at it if you want, or whatever. I know. My guests are never too scared to be like, I don't know. That's not my thing. But what do you think about kind of some of the true costs of a lot of these issues are hidden from us? We say go to a gas pump, and we might look and see that it was $2.50 in one area and over $3 in one area, or the summertime is more expensive, or this or that. But there's also all of these hidden, our taxes are sometimes subsidizing oil companies. There's all of these ways in which the actual cost of what we're doing, which is burning through the last of our finite resources at the very least, and not even talking about carbon emissions and everything else, that there's a much higher, that the true cost of a gallon of gasoline is in reality much, much more than what they're advertising at the pump. And you could probably say that about some people have advocated for, say, a sin tax on sugar, or something like that, processed sugar. Do you have any thoughts on any of those kind of policies?
Yeah, so I think sometimes it's nice, it would be nice if there was more transparency, so that we did understand where the costs are and how much they are. Because I don't think that the average person knows or understands that.
Yeah.
And so then it's hard to, subsidizing has been something that many end up relying on. For example, farmers often do.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's almost like we trapped ourselves into needing them.
Yeah.
Does that not seem that way sometimes?
Yeah.
And when it's like, well, but why do we need them?
Yeah.
You know, why are you going to
The
pay a
subsidies.
farmer to not produce
Right.
milk when, as I heard one farmer say, I can't like just tell my cows to stop producing milk. You know, so when there are starving children somewhere, you know, I get really frustrated with, I understand it, but yet I get frustrated with it.
Yeah, I think that I mean capitalism was this amazing way of decentralizing information and getting a lot more information on the ground in kind of a simple way of like not needing some centralized, this is how many loaves of bread this area is going to need at this time,
Right.
and the nightmares that ensued. And I think that you know, from that, because it worked out so well in so many regards, maybe we need to be like, okay, there was a lot of great aspects to that, and now we also need to have a little bit of respect for authority in certain aspects, as well, as if we're going to go through the costs of educating our populations and creating expertise and specialized, then we need to utilize those resources.
Right.
Yeah. How much do you know about COVID? Can I ask you some questions?
You can. You can. I want to circle back to the climate change at some point.
No, let's finish that conversation.
Okay, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
So there are some things that I think people aren't realizing that's happening with climate change. I know we hear about the change in the ice. So, you know, the ice, you have loss of this old ice, which is really what's causing polar bear populations to decline. But what we're seeing, even like maybe that people can relate to, maybe even more than that, would be beach temperatures. We all like to go to the beach, right? So the beach temperature has been really crazy high for many years now. We've had a couple of years that have been pretty normal, but we've had a lot of years where it's been really super high. And you might think, well, so I have to wear shoes when I'm walking on the sand. But people forget that those beaches are not just where we go and we lay and we play and make our sandcastles. They are places where sea turtles, for example, lay their eggs. And increased beach temperature means increased incubation temperature. Sea turtles, like most turtles, their sex is determined primarily by the temperature that they incubate at. So with these rising temperatures, we not only end up with, in this case, more females, and in some cases, all females being born off of a certain beach. How is that going to impact the population in the future? We're also seeing, at least we're documenting right now, increased numbers of deformities and lower numbers of these hatchlings being successful in making it out of the nest and making it back to the ocean. And then when they do, you think about that. So you've got these hatchlings stressed out because they're in these elevated temperatures now, and some of them actually come out with blood in their eyes because they're so hot. But they're coming out, they're being stressed in the nest, but those higher temperatures can be, because the sand is not sterile. right? There's all kinds of fungi and bacteria in the sand. So that's in the nest. And in some cases, that elevated temperature is like putting it in an incubator. And a lot of those organisms love that. And whereas that hatchling, when it is calm and just growing and happy, it is not going to be impacted by these organisms that are just, hanging out. They're growing, they're getting what they need to. But you stress that hatchling from increased temperatures, you get this organism that's like, ooh, I love this warm, nice little oven, and I'm going to keep multiplying and get larger in number. And hey, look, oh my goodness, there is a stressed out host, and I'm going to attack it. And you end up with them succumbing to fungi and bacteria that they wouldn't necessarily succumb to. So survival of them is being diminished. So we have climate change impacting the sea turtle populations in pretty major ways, which is, a way that I think most people aren't even aware of. Right. Climate change impacting this. So we think about the big things. How is it more hot for us, or are we having these more drastic temperatures? But we're not thinking about all the changes that are happening throughout the food chain.
Right.
If you want to call it that, or just life in general. How is it affecting plants? How is it affecting, we're seeing insects moving their threshold of where they would move to and going into areas where they normally wouldn't have. So their geographic range is changing. And again, you're getting these host and pathogen that didn't maybe see each other before, seeing each other now. So all of this is happening with climate change, and we're watching it happen. And it gets really frustrating when people are not recognizing that. But it has these health impacts in many, many ways.
Yeah, and then you have something like sea turtles that eat sea urchins that eat sea kelp, which is the forest of the ocean in a lot of areas, and gives rise to all of this life that makes a lot of fishing and everything else possible that humans benefit from. And without those turtles to keep those urchin populations in check, the kelp will be devastated, which will which will be kind of a desertification of that ocean region, which means you as a human are going to have to pay more for your fish at the grocery store, and all of these other as we're talking about hidden costs of doing things. What do you think about Canada puts the gross cancer lungs on the back of cigarettes? Is that what we're gonna have to put, like, deformed baby turtles on at our gas pumps or something? Is there, how do you I mean, how what steps do we take to get people more mindful about these insanely complicated relationships within our ecosystems?
Yeah, it takes people like you because people like me, the scientists, are not very good at communicating to the public. And if we don't get the public behind us and get them understanding what it is and why we're trying to give this message, what the message is and why it's important, we kind of are spinning our wheels a little bit. We're good at talking amongst ourselves, but we're not always so good at getting that message out. And that's what we have to do. We've got to get the message out. and make people aware of why it's important to them.
Yeah.
So it takes people like you.
Well, that's all that I wanted you to say this whole show. I just needed some validation for myself, which is what this show's all about. Yeah, it's a subject that I unfortunately don't talk near enough about on this show, even though I love wildlife so much. But I mean, so much of this show we talk about kind of cognitive biases and human behavior and decision making, and part of that was that early on I kind of thought, well, climate change is already kind of getting out there, and you don't need to go too far to hear a podcast about climate change where not everyone knows about something like the Dunning-Kruger effect, or confirmation bias, and these sorts of things. I'm talking about like 6 years ago when I started. Mm-hmm. It's been nice to see some of those concepts becoming more and more popular, but the more I talk to people, it's just like an all hands on deck situation with climate change and biodiversity. And I think we need just as many people with as many different perspectives and ways of communicating things and areas of research and expertise, doing what they can to get the word out and keep informing people.
Yeah, so see, it becomes a partnership.
Yeah.
This is part of One Health. It's people like you joining forces, being part of the team to get the message out.
Well, and I'm on board.
One thing with biodiversity that I heard it kind of described in this way, that if you have, in society, you have different workers, and you need all of those to make society work. Mm-hmm. Biodiversity is the same way, where you've got the different species. And if you take one of those away, just like if you took one of the workers away in a society, one group of workers, it's not going to function. And so it's the same with biodiversity. You take away a species and you lose that function. And I think that sometimes can help people get a better grasp on, why does biodiversity matter?
That's a beautiful analogy. Yeah, just imagine you woke up tomorrow and there's just mechanics simply don't exist. There's no one to work on your car, no one to fix the airplanes.
Right. Right, and we're realizing that with COVID, right? We're realizing who the important people are to make things keep working and moving forward.
Could I ask you a couple of COVID questions quick?
Sure, which brings us to COVID.
So, again, obviously, I don't know how involved you are with COVID specifically. I hope that my listeners don't hold you to knowing the exact perfect everything on every aspect of the incredibly complex situation, but it's also been a couple months since I've had kind of an infectious disease person or anyone in a related field on the show, and there's of course things are coming in fast, and there's a lot of developments. Political developments, cultural developments, different behaviors in different countries that have happened since then, and this news just coming out about a couple promising seeming vaccines, at least according to the headlines. I don't watch the news, and I don't put a whole lot of stock in exciting seeming headlines until I have a chance to ask someone that actually knows what they're talking about. So, first of all, what do you think about the vaccine news that's come out?
It's pretty exciting. It's, from a scientific standpoint, it's a little bit nerve-wracking too, because I worry you think when things get rushed along,
Right.
you always worry about that. But other than that, it's exciting, and I think it's going to be something that hopefully will be effective.
Yeah.
So I think so. It sounds like, and I would expect that it's going to get permission to start to be put into use, probably both of them, and then we'll start to see how effective it is. I think both are supposedly 95% effective.
I mean, that's
And
insane, right? If
it
it
is.
truly is 95, that's like a dream number, right? That was like way beyond what anyone was shooting for. Was my sense of it.
Yeah, yeah, but we'll see.
Yeah, and what so having to constantly deal with I mean, there's just so much conspiracy stuff out there, and it's just, and people are just really dug in, and you know, it's hard for people to be like, you know what, I was wrong about the 5G thing, and I might be wrong about this other thing too. People just like jump to the next thing. And so I have people send me lots of like anti-mask stuff and lots of like anti-vaccine stuff all of the time, and I don't know if you want to take a whack at any of this. The common thing that I see is someone will send me some like fringe-ish kind of speculative, not peer-reviewed paper from like March or April, questioning the efficacy of masks. And if you actually read the paper, which you can tell the people that sent it to me never actually did, just saw the little headline, it usually says that like the problems are of the questioning of, are people actually going to wear these things? Are they going to wear them the way that they're supposed to? You know, maybe some sanitation issues of changing them out, or wearing them for this or that length. Maybe an issue of making people put too much confidence in them, and neglecting some of the other aspects of distancing and not washing hands and that sort of thing. And then lots of people obsessed with, there's a lot of new mask experts out there, let me tell you, and a lot of people are obsessed with like, these cloth masks aren't as good as this and that, and therefore all masks are bad. That's the mask thing that I've been sent over and over and over again. And then the vaccine stuff is typically, look, I found this vaccine that had this side effect from like 30. There's a whole, we've talked about Andrew Wakefield and the autism thing, and hopefully that's been debunked enough to my listeners, if not the general public. But people will be like, there was some vaccine 30 years ago and people had this side effect. And you look, and the side effect was one of the effects of getting the actual virus. It was like one of the smaller ones, and it was like such an insanely small number of people that got it, and yet people will go, oh, the death rate, it's only 1 in 50 people die from COVID. But then they're like, I heard a story of someone's grandma heard from their chiropractor that a vaccine once made someone, gave someone Tourette's for 5 days, and like, oh, I better, you know, and so people seem to not be handling it well. But as you said, things get rushed. What kind of side effects are kind of legitimate for people to have concerns about, based on, you know, past vaccine things that have gone wrong?
Yeah, well, so you can think about this similar to the flu vaccine, right? Every year we have to have a new one,
Right.
because it's a new version of flu. And when people get the flu vaccine, some people have bad reactions.
Yeah.
And that's, you have to expect that, because again, our system, each host has a system in their body's immune system that's going to respond to something foreign, the vaccine, put into it. And so there's that chance. The vaccines are designed to try to prevent that, but there's no predicting how it's going to be on every single person. But what the vaccine is designed to do is to work with that host immune system and help teach it. It's like going to school. Help teach it, okay, this is what you need to, this is what's coming, and this is what you have to start preparing for. And so you need to start manufacturing now. It's telling our bodies, start manufacturing so that when you do see that organism come, you're going to be ready. Sometimes during manufacturing, things don't go so right. And so we might have a response. So again, can you say, well, then just don't use it? We don't do that, right? We don't do that with the flu vaccine. There are people who will not get a vaccine no matter what it is. And I understand that, but yet at the same point in time, that doesn't help us combat these pathogens. We see the rise of pathogens that maybe we've gotten rid of, and because people aren't continuing to get vaccinated, we see them come back.
Yeah.
So you have to, people need to think about that. But beyond the vaccine, prevention and just trying to avoid it is important. Are masks a cure-all? No, but they sure can help, and that's been shown. There are awesome videos that show somebody sneezing, and if they use a handkerchief or use their elbow, or how far it'll project, that people should watch those. And then that versus having the mask on. Masks are meant, yes, they can protect you somewhat, but they're really protecting other people. And you don't necessarily know. You may have the virus and be shedding it before you start to get sick from it. Or some people won't get sick, but they will still share it. And that's what the masks are designed to prevent. And are some masks better than others? Sure. But they're all going to at least have some effect and be helpful in some way. And it's better than not having a mask on. So there's a study, I believe, coming out soon, if it hasn't already come out, looking at the different types of masks and which ones are better. Yeah. But they're not all available to everybody. So you go with what you have and work with what you have. Now, people, if they think that they're wearing a mask and that's going to protect them from getting infected, that's a little scary, because that's really, the virus can, unless the mask is fitting properly, it will prevent some, it will prevent a lot, and might be enough in most cases. But you have to realize your eyes are mucous membranes that love to suck things in. Yes, you have to make sure the mask is covering your nose. A lot of people will wear it down here. So you need to wear it properly, because you have mucous membranes in your nose, in your mouth. So there are other ways that the virus can get in, obviously. And if the mask isn't fitting properly, it can get in around where it's not tight. But again, it still is, it's still helping. So I understand when people, it's just exactly what you said. People latch onto that one thing, and then they use that to say, because of that one thing, they're going to negate all of the positives and go with that one thing. But then that's bad because
Yeah.
then there's no protection at all.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I get it too. So like if I like don't get my workout in a day or something like that, I'm just like, ah, and then I'm gonna eat junk food, ah, and then I'm gonna do that. Ah, what the hell? I'm just gonna let everything go. What about, okay, so I have some personal, for instances. There's also kind of a funny thing too going on, that all of the sudden people have this, I guess I should be grateful people have like this real interest in the microbiome or whatever, but people are like, well, we're not challenging our immune system enough, and that's some other threat, and there, you know, there are some, especially for childhood development, some potential implications, but it's also, you know, I have someone I know that got COVID from a maskless wedding. They are politically predisposed to not believe the thing that has nearly killed them is a big deal. They haven't had their sense of taste or smell for a couple of months now. Got it back for a week and then lost it again. Have had no energy and are still like, it's like the flu or something like that, which I don't think that they've ever had. And then they and then they're like concerned about well, it's a good thing. She was like, well, it's a good thing I got this because now I don't need to get the vaccine, and like framing going out and getting COVID as this great healthy like workout. It's like your immune system doing push-ups or something like that, but vaccines are bad for you, which vaccines are actually readying your immune system for future threats, is just some more of the misinformation that I see out there. But do we know in terms of reinfection, do we have any sense of, do you want to take a whack at I mean, my understanding is that it's possible and probably unlikely, at least with a similar strain, for some period. It seems like it's happened, but it's less likely, right?
Yeah, that's actually a good summation. Yeah, so it's possible. I don't think we know yet how long the protection is going to remain. Like so once we get infected, I don't think we completely know if everybody is going to produce antibodies. And I don't think we know how long those antibodies are going to hang around and be effective. And I think that we also don't know because COVID, the virus is changing, right? So I don't think we know whether or not what antibodies protection we might mount to whatever COVID we were infected with will be protective against some of the other ones. So those are important issues that people, you know, you want to talk about like a false sense of security. That is probably a false sense of security, I think.
Because I had, and this is kind of basically the same thing again, but I forgot, it popped into my head. I had this fantastic question and experience on Instagram. Aaron wrote, I'm someone who's contracted and recovered from COVID and has been donating convalescent plasma. Did I say that word correctly, by the way? Woohoo! They tell what my level. They tell what my what level my antibodies are at, but I don't know the metric. They'll take my plasma so long as the antibodies are present over 1.0. Currently, I'm at 4.0. I've heard that reinfected individuals had their antibodies levels drop below 1.0, but that's just what I've heard. My question is about reinfection, which I've heard is worse the second time around, and likelihood of reinfection due to virus mutation. What do you know about this?
Yeah. So that is one thing that I was going to say. To know whether or not you do have antibodies, you could get tested and see if you do have them. And then they usually do give you a titer so that you know how protective you really are. And it's the same for a lot of things. For example, I'm vaccinated for rabies because I work with wildlife. And I have to have my titers checked. Now, I was vaccinated when I was a vet student, but I have since been exposed. And I will say that that did almost act like a booster because my titers shot way up.
Wow.
And so that can happen if you get reinfected. Now, in some cases, it might be that reinfection will mean that you're not going to be as sick. You might not be sick at all. Or it could be, if it's a different strain, especially maybe you do get worse. I think there's not always that. Viruses don't all act the same way.
I see.
And with time, your titers can change for various reasons. So if they drop below a certain point, that's when they say, oh, you need to get vaccinated so that you get your titers built back up. And so that would be a way where people would know whether or not, like your friend that got infected at the wedding, if she got her titers checked, and then they would be able to say, oh, you would still need the vaccination. So that is useful there. And in this case, with the question, if the cutoff is 1 and she's got 4, that's pretty good.
Okay. And what about how long can someone shed for? This person that still has kind of symptom. They're like still, this is a couple months have gone by. They're still congested. They're still, no taste, no smell, that sort of stuff. But they have this congestion still. Does that mean that they can potentially still be spreading COVID?
It could, and I think that then you need to get, she should be retested to see if she's still testing positive and shedding the virus.
I see.
That would be the ideal thing to do.
Yeah, okay. Well, one relief, because I had it kind of in my head with reinfection. Like in my mind, when it went to like the worst case scenario, I thought, if this is, if people that are predisposed, if they've had, the flu before, they have respiratory issues or whatever, those people tend to handle COVID worse. I kind of assumed that if you got COVID once and then were to get maybe a second strain or so, you would already be automatically in that high risk category of someone that had already, now you have kind of like a pre-existing condition, but perhaps having gone through the similar virus before, you would have antibodies that would maybe mitigate some of that. Is that what
It could, unless you had
individual differences apply.
Yeah, it could, unless maybe you could be more susceptible if you have permanent damage, or at least you still have lingering effects. Because everybody is responding differently, and in some cases, people. The main thing I've heard about is they don't have the lung capacity anymore, and if they don't have that lung capacity, being hit by another round of that virus is going to impact your lungs again, is probably going to be worse. But again, it would probably depend on your immune system and how effective it would be against that second round of the virus.
I have one last little thing before we wrap up. This is something that I was, I have to say that I have throughout COVID had periods where I can be pretty judgmental about people. I try not, I go back and forth. And some times I'm like, life's short, be judgmental once in a while. It's been a frustrating situation for a lot of people. I'm sure people that have the exact opposite take of me on every issue. It's been frustrating for them as well. But here was a blind spot that I had. So I went to this is like the one thing that I've done in all of COVID that for me felt like I was even risking. Well, I played pickleball in like a cohort of people that I know take it very seriously in my little bubble, the same people each time. And but I went to a movie. I checked ahead of time. I saw that no one else had reserved a seat. Christopher Nolan's new movie Tenet, he's my favorite filmmaker. So I'm in there by myself, and I was debating, like, if anyone else comes in here, will I leave? I don't know. They did such an amazing job. The seats were like roped off like 15 feet apart or something like that. I think there's probably 20 seats available or something in this big like 150 seat something. Like I felt really safe, and I thought, like, compared to going to the grocery store, which I think people would benefit from ordering groceries and not going in, especially with having surface transmission being a bit lower of a source of transmission. That makes me, I would feel much safer ordering groceries in and going to a super safe movie theater and sitting 15 feet away from anyone. Now, I told a friend this that takes COVID more seriously than I do, and she contested that the aerosol and being in a room for 2 hours, no matter how spread out people are, would be a bad idea. And then I looked into that, and I'm kind of leaning towards saying that she's perhaps right about that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think she's so I would consider that, because you're in a movie theater for a long time.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you have somebody who's infected, now if everybody's wearing masks, it should be reduced, but you still have to consider that that's a long time to be together, and perhaps.
Yeah, and they're instructed to, but not when they're eating popcorn or soda,
Right.
which is like, again, this isn't like, you can't trust. I don't trust myself to necessarily put the mask on in between every single bite, let alone some stranger.
Yeah, it would have to be that they weren't allowed to eat or drink and do anything. They had to keep it on. Yeah, no, definitely if they're eating and drinking. And then the other thing with mass, movie theater, grocery stores, the thing that I always, it just shocks me, is you see this sign when you enter the grocery store, must have on masks. And then you walk in, and before you know it, you've seen people with no masks. And it's like, did they not see the sign? Did they not care? And I also think, well, I guess, what is the grocery store supposed to do? Unless they have somebody standing there, saying, no mask, you can't come in.
I have a teacher friend who's like, some kid will get dropped off and not have their mask on. Everyone else, and then be like, oh, their kid needs to wear a mask, and the parents saying, oh, we don't do COVID in our household. You don't do COVID in your household? This is where some of this frustration that I was mentioning comes from. I do wish, there's this idea that like, let's all, if you want to negotiate 101, what you need to do is you need to get on the same page and find those things that we can all agree on. And hey, I want to be happy and healthy, don't you? And hey, yes, I want to be happy and healthy as well. And see, there you go. You've found some common ground. And now you have an entryway into having this. Like, that's all nonsense. Everyone has a different idea about what happiness and health means. I wish we could change the debate of like, hey, can we agree on what objective reality is and how we determine what is true and what isn't? And let's have a conversation about that. How do we know the world is round as opposed to flat? How do we know that creationism is or Darwinism is the correct hypothesis? Because this isn't just a fun debate. This has real world implications in terms of our disease avoidance, in terms of our mating behavior, how we spend money. Knowing how evolution shaped us is a little more than, it has much more serious consequences than your political side. Same with same with climate change. And so I think we need to scrap the age-old idea of like reaching across and have a conversation of like, here's how science works. This is what science literacy is about. And just start with a 101 public. Science isn't just a seventh grade chemistry class where you watch a volcano like foam or whatever. It has some big implications in all of our lives, and we can all do it. We can all be a part of it. We can all read papers for ourselves. You can even redo the studies yourself if you want to, if you're so convinced that it's not true. That's one of the wonderful things about science. So I really appreciate what you're doing with the One Health initiative, because I also know from talking with Nina, she, doing the important thing of reaching out to restaurants and figuring out how can we work with restaurants, which are working with farms, which are, to help with local economies. And so I so much appreciate your interdisciplinary approach and factoring in so many facets of the human condition, but life more broadly, and biodiversity and everything else. Do you have anything that you wanted to say before we wrap up? Otherwise, you've been a terrific guest. You know what? How do people find out more about the One Health initiative?
Yes, they can go to our website. Just Google One Health at University of Tennessee, and it should come up. And I could send you that link.
Yeah, I'll include. Later. But what are people going to find if they go to the One Health initiative?
They're going to find information about One Health and what we're doing, research that we have ongoing, and topics that we're doing. We're also education is part of it. So see what we're doing for education and outreach. And also, eventually, we're going to have a donate button on there so people can give. So ways to contact us if they want more information, and how they might themselves contribute to what we're trying to do. So it'll be great.
I love it. Thank you so much. And I hope to get some more One Health members and partners on the show soon.
That would be awesome.
Thank you so much, Deb Miller, for joining me. Thank you, listeners, for being such wonderful, curious people, and we'll talk with you more next week. If you want to support the show and maybe pick up some last-minute holiday gifts for people, please consider checking out Lost Sailor Design, who I have been working with for years. I've had all sorts of shows. I sell keychains and a bunch of other things, wallets, belts, and with Here We Are logo. And you can get Here We Are stuff on the site if you search Here We Are, but with my partnership, anyone that puts in the offer code "Here We Are 20" gets 20% off anything. I've bought a purse for a girlfriend of mine in the past. I've bought a bunch of different journals for friends and people I have like business relationships with and stuff. I've gotten all sorts of different things from people, and the belts are amazing. I haven't worn a belt in some time, but it might be, if you're looking to change up your belt game before you kind of reintroduce yourself back out there in the world, it might be a good thing to think about. And support me on Patreon if you like as well, and Libro.fm. And you can get, if you check on herewearepodcast.com and the YouTube description, there's always offer codes for those long-lasting partnerships of mine if you're into audiobooks. All right, guys, you are awesome. Those of you that listen all the way to the end, you are, of course, my favorites.